dressed up as a clown. But rather than give up, the 43-year-old from Taiping, latest breaking news today. The four would-be citizen astronauts poised to ride a SpaceX rocket ship around the globe as the first all-civilian crew launched into orbit said on Tuesday they were eager for liftoff on the eve of their flight, feeling only the good kind of jitters. "I was just worried that this moment would never come in my life. Let's get going, let's do it," said Son Proctor, 51, a geoscience professor, artist and lifelong space enthusiast who was a 2009 finalist in NASA's astronaut candidate program before she was cut. Proctor also disclosed she and her flightmates received a telephone call from one of her personal heroes, former First Lady Michelle Obama, wishing them well, an honor she said would stay with me the rest of my life. The Inspiration 4 quartet are due for liftoff as early as 8 p.m. on Wednesday, 0000 GMT, from Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida, for an orbital flight expected to last about 3 days before splashdown. Proctor and her crewmates, billionaire e-commerce executive and jet pilot Jared Isaacman, 38, physician assistant Haley Arsenault, 29, and aerospace data engineer Chris Sembroski, 42, took reporters' questions at a pre-launch briefing inside a SpaceX hangar a little more than 24 hours before launch time. Behind them, visible in the distance through the hangar's open doors, stood the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and Crew Dragon capsule designed to 575 kilometers over the Earth, higher than the International Space Station. That is far beyond the presumably enormous sum to fly all four crew members into orbit. Musk joined in on a pre-flight check-in call on Tuesday, and did give us his assurances that the entire leadership is solely focused on this mission, Isaacman told reporters when asked about pre-launch nerves. "No jitters, just excited to get going." Arsenault, a childhood bone cancer survivor who now works with young lymphoma and leukemia patients at St. Jude Children's Research Center in Memphis, Tennessee, which the Inspiration 4 mission was designed largely to promote, said she was just so excited. "Any jitters are the good kind," she added. "I'm just waiting for tomorrow to get here." Joining Tuesday's event was at least one retired NASA astronaut, Catherine Katie Coleman, 60, a veteran of 2 space shuttle missions who spoke up to wish the Inspiration 4 crew well, telling them, "We want to welcome you to the family." California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom successfully fended off an effort to oust him from office in Tuesday's special election, U.S. television networks said, overcoming a Republican campaign to unseat him over his liberal policies on immigration, COVID-19 and crime. Newsom, a first-term governor beset by challenges including the COVID-19 pandemic, extreme drought and severe wildfires, boosted turnout among Democrats with a flurry of late campaigning and overcame the move by Republicans to recall him. "I'm humbled and grateful to the millions and millions of Californians that exercise their fundamental right to vote," Newsom said in a victory speech Tuesday night in the state capital of Sacramento. In the final days of the race, he appeared alongside President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, who formerly represented California as a U.S. Senator and Attorney General. By late Tuesday, returns showed Newsom easily winning a majority of support from voters who said he should remain in office. The leading Republican gubernatorial candidate Larry Elder, a black radio talk show host and supporter of former President Donald Trump, garnered about 43% of the vote on the portion of the ballot asking who should replace Newsom if he were recalled, the New York Times reported. Elder has vowed to remove requirements for COVID-19 vaccines and mask wearing. In the days leading up to the recall vote, he and Trump pushed the narrative that Democrats planned to steal the election. The removal of Newsom, who was elected in a landslide in 2018, would have set off alarms among Democrats, coming in one of the nation's most liberal states just over a year before the 2022 elections that will decide control of Congress. Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1 in the state, and polls consistently showed that a strong majority of voters opposed recalling Newsom. But Democrats worried that complacency among their voters could have tilted the election toward Republicans. Newsom's immigration and crime policies, along with the governor's handling of the pandemic, fueled the petition drive by conservatives to put the recall question on the ballot. In early voting and vote by mail, Democrats returned ballots at more than twice the rate of Republicans. This prompted fear among Republican leaders that their voters had taken to heart false claims of election fraud pushed by Trump and conservative media after Biden won the 2020 presidential election. In response, the California Republican Party promised to fight for election integrity and released videos showing party officials confidently mailing in ballots, tying the recall effort to Trump and efforts in Texas, Georgia and other states to tighten abortion restrictions and impose new laws that Democrats believe curtail voting rights help Democrats turn out their voters. "We could see changes like what's happening in Texas," said Katie Van Note, 27, a dance instructor who voted in Oceanside, just north of Carlsbad, and described her politics as left-leaning. The Secretary of State has until October 22 to certify the results. Macau casino operator stocks plummeted by as much as a third on Wednesday, losing around $14 billion in value, as the government kicked off a public consultation that investors fear will lead to tighter regulations in the world's largest gambling hub. With Macau's lucrative casino licenses up for rebidding next year, a government proposal to revise the city's gaming law spooked a Hong Kong market already slammed hard into the red by a broad Beijing regulatory crackdown, across sectors from technology to education and property, that has sliced hundreds of billions of dollars off asset values. Wynn Macau led the plunge, falling as much as 34% to a record low, followed by a 28% tumble for Sands China. Peers MGM China, Galaxy Entertainment, SJM and Melco Entertainment all fell heavily, bringing the drop to 109 billion Hong Kong dollars, $14 billion. The slump came after Lei Wei-nong, Macau's Secretary for Economy and Finance, late on Tuesday gave notice of a 45-day consultation on the gambling industry starting Wednesday, saying there were still some deficiencies in industry supervision. Beijing, increasingly wary of Macau's acute reliance on gambling, has not yet indicated how the license rebidding process will be judged. Some Hong Kong stock analysts wasted little time in downgrading their view of the near-term prospects for casino operators in the Chinese Special Administrative Region. All are required to rebid for licenses when current permits expire in June 2022. At J.P. Morgan, analyst D.S. Kim said the bank was downgrading all Macau gaming names from overweight to neutral or underweight due to heightened scrutiny on capital management and daily operations ahead of license renewals. "We admit it's only a directional signal, while the level of actual regulation still remains a moot point," he said, adding that the announcement would have already planted a seed of doubt in investors' minds. At a press briefing on Tuesday, Lei detailed 9 areas for the consultation, including the number of licenses to be given, increased regulation and protecting employee welfare, as well as introducing government representatives to supervise day-to-day operations at the casinos. Discussions over the future of Macau's casino licenses come amid rocky U.S. China relations, leaving some investors fearing that U.S. based casino operators may not fare as well as local players. The government has not singled out any U.S. players, but there has been a push within the companies to beef up the presence of Chinese or local executives to position themselves more as a Macau operator rather than foreign. Ahead of the license expirations, operators have tried to bolster their corporate responsibility and diversify into non-gaming offerings to placate Beijing's fears of over-reliance on gambling. Macau has massively tightened scrutiny of casinos in recent years, with authorities clamping down on illicit capital flows from mainland China and targeting underground lending and illegal cash transfers. Beijing has also intensified a war on cross-border flows of funds for gambling, affecting the financing channels of Macau's junket operators and their VIP casino customers. In June this year, Macau more than doubled the number of gaming inspectors and restructured several departments to ramp up supervision. George Choi, an analyst at Citigroup in Hong Kong, said that while the public consultation document offered limited details, the suggested revisions enhance long-term sustainable growth for the industry with positive implications on the 6 casino operators. He cautioned, however, that we will not be surprised if the market focuses only on the potentially negative implications, given the weak investor sentiment. The consultation comes as Macau has struggled with a dearth of travelers because of coronavirus curbs since the start of 2020. While gambling revenues have picked up in recent months, they remain at less than half of 2019 monthly hauls. North Korea fired a pair of ballistic missiles off its east coast, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said on Wednesday, days after testing a long-range cruise missile. Pyongyang has been steadily developing its weapons program amid a standoff over talks aimed at dismantling its nuclear and ballistic missile programs in return for U.S. sanctions relief. The negotiations have stalled since 2019. Japan's Coast Guard also said an object that could be a ballistic missile was fired from North Korea that landed outside its exclusive economic zone. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga condemned the apparent test launch and called it outrageous. Both Suga and South Korean President Moon Jae-in convened sessions of their National Security Councils to discuss the launches, according to their offices. The foreign ministers of South Korea and China were holding talks in Seoul on Wednesday amid concerns over North Korea's recent missile test and stalled denuclearization negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington. If confirmed as a ballistic missile, the test would be North Korea's first since March this year and a further breach of UN sanctions. The launch came after North Korea said it successfully tested a new long-range cruise missile last weekend, calling it a strategic weapon of great significance. Analysts say the missile could be the country's first such weapon with a nuclear capability. Mexican authorities rescued on Tuesday 22 foreigners, most of them Cuban and Haitian, who were earlier in the day kidnapped when gunmen stormed a hotel in the central state of San Luis Potosi, the region's attorney general said. The gunmen also kidnapped 16 Mexicans when they ransacked the Sol y Luna Hotel in Matehuala, about 195 kilometers, 120 miles, north of the city of San Luis Potosi, the regional capital. The Mexicans were released earlier, but the foreign nationals had to be rescued in a remote area by the road between Matehuala and the regional capital, Arturo Garza Herrera, the attorney general of the state, said in a statement. The foreigners were due to be transferred to the city of San Luis Potosi to be fed and to get medical help. Garza's office did not give any details of the rescue or say if any of the foreigners were injured. While most of the rescued foreigners were Haitians and Cubans, earlier there were reports that some Venezuelans were among them, Garza's office said in a statement. 3 minors and a pregnant woman were among them. I am going to notify the Migration Institute so that they can be involved since we do not know the migratory status of these people, Garza said. Many migrants hoping to reach the United States face great danger on the way, with kidnappings, extortion, rape and even murders reported. Some are conscripted to work for drug cartels fighting over drug trafficking routes. In June, a human rights group reported that some 3,300 migrants stranded in Mexico since January due to a U.S. border policy have been kidnapped, raped, trafficked or assaulted. The Taliban have denied that one of their top leaders has been killed in a shootout with rivals, following rumors about internal splits in the movement nearly a month after its lightning victory over the Western-backed government in Kabul. Salil Shaheen, a Taliban spokesman, said Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, former head of the Taliban political office who was named deputy prime minister last week, issued a voice message rejecting claims he had been killed or injured in a clash. He says it is lies and totally baseless, Shaheen said in a message on Twitter. The Taliban also released video footage purportedly showing Baradar at meetings in the southern city of Kandahar. Reuters could not immediately verify the footage. The denials follow days of rumors that supporters of Baradar had clashed with those of Sirajuddin Haqqani, head of the Haqqani network that is based near the border with Pakistan and was blamed for some of the worst suicide attacks of the war. The rumors follow speculation over possible rivalries between military commanders like Haqqani and leaders from the political office in Doha like Baradar, who led diplomatic efforts to reach a settlement with the United States. The Taliban have repeatedly denied the speculation over internal divisions. Baradar, once seen as the likely head of a Taliban government, had not been seen in public for some time and was not part of the ministerial delegation which met Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani in Kabul on Sunday. The movement's supreme leader, Mullah Hibatullah Akhundzada, has also not been seen in public since the Taliban seized Kabul on August 15, although he issued a public statement when the new government was formed last week. Speculation over Taliban leaders has been fed by the circumstances surrounding the death of the movement's founder, Mullah Omar, which was only made public in 2015, 2 years after it happened, setting off bitter recriminations among the leadership. Britain will begin a broad-based COVID-19 vaccine booster program for those older and more vulnerable adults soon as Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government relies on vaccines rather than further lockdowns to navigate a bumpy winter. British officials said that COVID-19 vaccines have saved more than 112,000 lives and averted 24 million cases of the disease as they recommended all vulnerable people, frontline health staff and those aged over 50 be offered a booster shot, starting with the oldest and most vulnerable. Johnson hopes that the booster program, which is being undertaken on a precautionary basis without firm evidence about its likely impact, will mean that hospitals can bear the burden of winter without the need for another lockdown. But Health Minister Sajid Javid said a Plan B, involving mandatory vaccine certificates in some settings, mandatory mask wearing and asking people to work from home, was being held in reserve. Vaccinations for health workers were likely to be made compulsory, he said. Booster doses are an important way of keeping the virus under control for the long term, Javid told Parliament, saying the program would begin next week. We have prepared a Plan B of contingency measures that we can call upon only if they are needed and is supported by the data. The government's 30-page winter strategy cautioned that the Plan B could be implemented at short notice. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunizations, JVCI, recommendation of a third dose 6 months after a second shot, paves the way for a broad revaccination program in Britain, which has one of the world's highest death tolls from COVID-19. Britain is also currently recording the second highest number of new infections after the United States. A booster program is being launched in the United States this month, with the likes of Israel, Ireland and Italy also moving ahead with booster shots. British officials said protection from 2 doses of vaccine beyond 6 months was uncertain and that boosters would prevent illness and deaths from COVID-19 over the winter, but did not say whether the extra shots would lower transmission rates. We're not past the pandemic. We know this winter could quite possibly be bumpy at times, England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer Jonathan Van Tam told reporters. It's better to be preemptive and to be prepared and plan for the worst possibilities. Britain has officially recorded 134,000 COVID-19 deaths, and more than 7 million cases. So far 44 million people have had 2 vaccine doses, 81% of those aged over 16. On Monday, the government said those aged 12 to 15 would also be offered shots. Johnson scrapped the last coronavirus restrictions in England in July, citing the more favorable conditions of the school summer holidays as he eyed what he characterized as a return to normal. The pandemic is far from over, but thanks to our phenomenal vaccine program, new treatments and testing we are able to live with the virus without significant restrictions on our freedoms, Johnson said in a statement. The JCVI said its preference was that the Pfizer, PFE, vaccine was used for the booster dose, or alternatively a half dose of a Moderna shot. Britain ordered 60 million additional Pfizer doses for the booster program in April. Professor Wei Shen Lim, chair for COVID-19 immunization on the JCVI, said their advice for a booster dose did not imply that there would be a requirement for a shot every 6 months. He also said not everyone under 50 years old would require another shot. The British recommendation comes after some leading scientists, including from the US Food and Drug Administration and World Health Organization, wrote in Monday's Lancet Medical Journal that COVID boosters were not yet needed for the general population. Amazon hiked its average starting wage to $18 per hour on Tuesday and said it plans to hire more than 125,000 warehouse and transportation workers in the United States. Reuters exclusively reported the news earlier on Tuesday. The world's largest online retailer also said it would pay a sign-on bonus of $3,000 in some locations and the hourly wage could go up to $22.50. Amazon was among the first few retailers to set a $15 an hour minimum wage in 2018. Amazon had said in May it would pay around $17 in average wages. The company is hiring to run the 100 logistics facilities it will launch this month in the United States, on top of the more than 250 that opened earlier this year. The additional staffing will also help roll out one-day delivery for Amazon's Prime Loyalty Club members. Retailers are scrambling to hire hourly workers in a tight labor market and have been offering benefits and sign-on bonuses to entice them. Walmart said earlier this month it planned to hire 20,000 workers at its supply chain division ahead of the busy holiday season. When the coronavirus pandemic struck Malaysia, Shahrul Hisam Baharudin, like many others working closely with people, soon lost his work as an entertainer who juggled and sometimes dressed up as a clown. But rather than give up, the 43-year-old from Taiping, in western Malaysia found a new way of using his skills, disinfecting people's homes while wearing his clown's outfit. For his new role, he adapted the smoke machine he had used at parties to become a disinfection device, while providing some extra cheer by entertaining children in his clown outfit, completed by a surgical mask with a painted-on red nose and smile. Since children cannot go out or go to the mall and they are spending more time at home, maybe they too are feeling stressed, said Shahrul Hisam, who has become known locally as the fogging clown. So with this kind of appearance, maybe I can entertain them and cheer them up, while disinfecting their house, he added. After cleaning their homes, Shahrul Hisam will usually spend time with his clients' children, making them laugh by creating animal-shaped balloons and taking photographs together. His antics soon went viral online, with clients praising him for bringing some much-needed fun to their homes during a difficult time. Malaysia, which has reported nearly 2 million COVID-19 cases and 20,419 related deaths, has been under some form of lockdown since May after a wave of infections driven by the Delta variant. In the past, Shahrul Hysam also used to be a master of ceremonies, as well as a disc jockey, before lockdowns put a stop to large gatherings. Now, he gets an average of 3 orders a week to disinfect homes, malls and shops. Fogging services like this are provided everywhere now, but my style is different, he said. Russian President Vladimir Putin received his Syrian counterpart Bashar al-Assad on Monday for the first time since 2018 and criticized foreign forces that are in Syria without permission or a UN mandate, a rebuke of the United States and Turkey. Putin is Assad's most powerful ally in the decade-long Syrian conflict. His deployment of Russia's Air Force in 2015 helped to turn the tide in Assad's favor, allowing him recover most of the territory lost to insurgents. However, Turkish forces are now present in much of the north and northwest, helping to shore up the last major bastion of anti-Assad rebels, and U.S. forces are supporting Kurdish-led militias who control parts of the east and northeast. Assad, who has also been assisted by Iran during the conflict, has made few trips abroad since the war began in 2011. Putin told him the main problem in Syria was the presence of foreign forces without permission or a UN mandate, which clearly runs counter to international law, the Kremlin said on Tuesday. This undermines your ability to use your best efforts to consolidate the country and promote recovery at a pace that would have been possible if a legitimate government controlled the entire country. The Syrian state views the U.S. and Turkish forces as occupiers, while Russian forces and Iranian-backed militias are there at the government's invitation. Terrorists sustained very serious damage, and the Syrian government, headed by U.S., controls 90% of the territories, Putin said, according to the Kremlin. However, according to other assessments, he holds less than this. Issuing its latest report on Syria on Tuesday, the UN Commission of Inquiry put the portion under Assad's control at just 70%. Its latest report documented increased violence, fighting and rights violations in the year to the end of June, including arbitrary detention by government forces. It said Syria was unsafe for refugees to return to. The meeting with Assad on Monday was Putin's last public engagement before he announced on Tuesday that he was self-isolating as a precaution after several members of his entourage fell ill with COVID-19. Assad and his wife both recovered from COVID-19 earlier this year. The Kremlin said Assad had thanked Putin for providing humanitarian aid and for his efforts to halt the spread of terrorism. He lauded what he called the success of Russian and Syrian armies in liberating occupied territories. Assad also said the sanctions imposed by some nations on Syria were anti-human and illegitimate. The United States tightened sanctions against Syria last year, saying it wanted to force Assad to stop the war and agree to a political solution. The Syrian state news agency SANA said the two leaders had discussed cooperation between their armies in combating terrorism and completing the liberation of the land that is still under the control of terrorist organizations. Apple on Tuesday is expected to show new iPhone and Apple Watch models with slight upgrades, and analysts expect that wireless carriers will play an outsized role in the annual show as they try to entice consumers into 5G plans. Apple last year introduced its iPhone 12, which featured a new look and its first devices with 5G connectivity. This year, analysts expect modest hardware upgrades and a deeper focus on 5G. In particular, carriers such as AT&T, Verizon Communications and T-Mobile that have significantly built out their networks since the start of this year are likely to offer new incentives around the devices that can take advantage of the faster speeds those networks can offer, said Ben Badgerin, head of consumer technologies at Creative Strategies. There seems to be way more 5G network capacity than was in place even 6 months ago, Badgerin said. They want people upgrading. They're going to be really aggressive. Apple's biggest product launch of the year comes as some of the shine has come off its stock as business practices such as charging software developers commissions on in-app payments have come under regulatory scrutiny. Apple shares were up about 15.6% year-to-date, trailing the Nasdaq Composite Index, which was up nearly 19% over the same period. The iPhone 13, as analysts expect the new phone to be called, likely will not look much different on the outside from the iPhone 12. but analysts expect it to have a faster Wi-Fi and processor chips, and Bloomberg has reported that the top model is likely to focus on display and camera enhancements such as a portrait mode to blur backgrounds when shooting videos. Analysts also believe Apple will continue the steady updates to the Apple Watch, which has become a cornerstone of its $30.6 billion accessories segment, which was up 25% in Apple's most recent fiscal year even as its iPhone revenue declined slightly. Analysts widely believe that Apple users who buy more than one product, such as an Apple Watch and iPhone, are more likely to stick with the brand and spend on the company's apps and services. Apple is likely to focus on more fitness features with the watch, which is paired tightly with Apple Fitness Plus, a paid service offering guided workouts with Apple instructors. It's the one service they offer where you literally have to have this product or you can't use this service, Badgerin said. Britain's Health Secretary Sajid Javid signaled on Tuesday that a requirement for expensive PCR tests for COVID-19 for international travelers arriving in Britain would be dropped in favor of cheaper lateral flow tests. Asked by a lawmaker if lateral flow tests could be used for initial screening, with a small proportion of positive cases then needing a PCR test, Javid said, "I don't want to preempt the statement of my right honourable friend the Transport Secretary, but I believe when he makes that statement that my honourable friend will be pleased." Javid said on Sunday he wanted to get rid of PCR tests as soon as possible. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is due to issue an update on England's transport rules this week. Britain's biggest airport Heathrow on Monday demanded that the government change its travel rules to help the sector recover. China Evergrande is teetering between a messy meltdown with far-reaching impacts, a managed collapse or the less likely prospect of a bailout by Beijing for what was once the country's top-selling property developer. Founded in Guangzhou in 1996, Evergrande has epitomized China's freewheeling era of borrowing and building, but with liabilities of nearly 2 trillion yuan, $305 billion, its possible collapse looms as one of China's largest for years. Debt and land buying curbs and hundreds of new rules have been imposed on Chinese developers over recent years as part of a push to cut financial risks and promote affordable housing. Evergrande, which accelerated efforts to cut its debts in 2020 after regulators introduced caps, does not have any major offshore bond maturities until early next year, but tardy payment of suppliers and interest on loans have brought to a head concerns that have long nagged at investors. Now, without access to fresh funding, Evergrande cannot pay suppliers, finish projects or raise income, prompting it to hire advisors and warn of default risk. This, along with a buyout, breakup or bailout are the scenarios now being evaluated. And while analysts have played down comparisons to the 2008 collapse of U.S. investment bank Lehman Brothers, which caused crises at counterparties and ultimately seized up global markets, some investors have similar contagion concerns. If as expected Evergrande is defaulting on its debt and goes through a restructuring, I don't see why it would be contained, Michelle Lowy of banking and asset management firm SC Lowy, which focuses on distressed and high-yield debt, said. There are other developers that are suffering from the same problem of no access to liquidity and have extended themselves too much, Lowy added. Other worries include the exposure of banks and the determination of regulators to press on with property market reforms despite hints of damaging consequences. Reaction has so far concentrated in the bond market and on Evergrande stock, as well as the stocks and bonds of other developers such as, among others, Guangzhou Ranf Properties and Xinyuan Real Estate. Evergrande shares are down about 90% in 14 months, while its dollar bonds are trading at 60 to 70% below par. Stress is mounting for the most obvious gray rhino in China, namely the real estate sector, Natixis economist Alicia Garcia Herrero said. The most immediate concern is of a real estate crash rather than a Lehman-style financial crisis. An Evergrande fire sale could crush prices, causing leveraged developers to blow up and crippling a sector comprising a quarter of China's economy. Lehman was very different as it went across the financial system, freezing activity, said Patrick Peregrine, an independent London-based analyst. Millions of contracts with multiple counterparties, everyone was trying to work out their exposure, he said. With Evergrande it depresses the entire real estate sector. Bank exposure is also wide, and a leaked 2020 document, written off as a fabrication by Evergrande but taken seriously by analysts, showed liabilities extending to more than 128 banks and over 121 non-banking institutions. But data suggests non-performing loans at commercial banks were a manageable 1.76% last quarter, and compared to the United States, China has far greater control over its financial system. A drive by authorities to cut developers' debts is also seen as increasing the likelihood of a property liquidation. The government has worked tirelessly to drive deleverage in the bloated real estate sector, so throwing a lifeline to Evergrande now is unlikely, said James Scci, distressed debt analyst at credit analytics provider Reorg. Analysts are increasingly expecting a managed collapse that seeks to protect smaller investors, with around 100 angrily showing up to Evergrande's headquarters on Tuesday, while bondholders take a haircut. "We do not believe the government has an incentive to bail out Evergrande, which is a private-owned enterprise," Nomura analyst Iris Chen said in a note to clients. "But they will also not actively push Evergrande down and will supervise a more orderly default, if any, in our view. If Evergrande is to recoup anything, it must first find buyers for its assets, which it has been struggling to do as potential saviors seem content to wait for more distress." In a stock exchange announcement on Tuesday, Evergrande said it had not been able to complete the disposal of its office building in Hong Kong within the expected timetable. The ongoing negative media reports concerning the group have dampened the confidence of potential property purchasers, Evergrande added.
Don't go yet. We are not done yet. Let me invite you to the world of Scci. Remember to attend our Monday website creation class, Wednesday our market outlook on trading and investment networking, and Friday our CEO mega networking and business presentation event. Lastly, let me share with you. Welcome to the world of Scci Digital TV. Watch and chat with friends on the latest news in Scci YouTube or Facebook channel. We showcase guest speaker seminar at 2 p.m. daily. Get to know our Scci official members at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. daily. Wait no more, subscribe to Scci YouTube and Facebook Digital TV channel now. If you are a business owner, start selling your products through Scci platforms.
Singapore first integrated social and business platform is here. Chat online marketplace. Everyone is chatting in chat. Connect with new friends around the world. Sharing opportunities and moments. Know what happened around the world. No more prank calls or targeted advertisements. Your personal data privacy is protected against remarketing. Download Chat Online Marketplace now. Singapore first integrated social and business platform. Available in Apple stores and Play Store. Leading Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives on Monday proposed a substantial rollback of former President Donald Trump's tax cuts, including raising the top tax rate on corporations to 26.5% from the current 21%. Democrats on the powerful House Ways and Means Committee said they will debate legislation this week that would achieve the changes as part of their broader, $3.5 trillion domestic investment plan. In an attempt to finance the new spending, the Democratic-led committee will debate a proposal to raise $2.9 trillion in revenue over 10 years, according to a document circulated among members of the panel. Besides increasing corporate taxes, wealthy individuals would see a jump in their income taxes as well as higher capital gains and estate taxes. Even if the legislation as proposed passes Congress and is signed by Democratic President Joe Biden, corporate taxes would still be lower than they were before the enactment of the tax cuts pushed through by Republicans in 2017. But the top individual income tax rate would revert to its pre-2017 level. The Tax Writing Ways and Means Committee has scheduled work sessions for Tuesday and Wednesday to debate tax policy and other matters under its jurisdiction to be included in the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, which would require a simple majority to be passed in the Senate. House Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal will attempt to win the committee's approval of the tax changes that are aimed at helping pay for expanded social services for the elderly and children and tackling climate change. Neal, a Massachusetts representative, wants to set a graduated corporate tax rate of 18% on annual income below $400,000, 21% on income up to $5 million, and 26.5% on income above $5 million. The benefit of the graduated corporate rate would phase out for firms making more than $10 million. Currently, the federal tax rate on corporations is 21%, down from the 35% rate that was in effect prior to the 2017 Republican tax restructuring. Biden had proposed raising the current corporate rate to 28%. Neal's plan would raise the top individual tax rate to 39.6% from 37% on taxable income above $400,000 for individuals and $450,000 for married couples. Those thresholds are below Biden's proposed thresholds of $452,700 for individuals and $509,300 for married couples. Republicans have been particularly critical of moves to increase estate taxes. The House Democrats' plan would accelerate the expiration of Republicans' temporary doubling of an exemption from those taxes to $24 million. The exemption, which was passed in 2017, would expire at the end of 2021 instead of the end of 2025 under current law. Neal's proposal also would increase the capital gains tax rate for those with incomes above $400,000 to 25% from the current 20% and include an additional 3% surcharge on taxable income in excess of $5 million. Biden has proposed a capital gains rate of 39.6% for those with incomes above $1 million, spurring concern from Republicans and some Democrats. The lower, 25% rate increase now being proposed would capture far more taxpayers and be supplemented by the 3% surcharge on income above $5 million. In addition to raising taxes, Democrats also proposed using the tax code to encourage the construction of more low-income housing, including in rural areas, which could help win the support from some wavering moderate Democrats, including Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. And in an attempt to reduce carbon emissions, Democrats are seeking sizable tax credits for the purchase of electric vehicles. So far, the Democrats' wide-ranging legislation has not attracted the support of any Republicans, who have been adamant in defending their 2017 tax cuts and argue that the tax hikes would hurt businesses and kill jobs. Democrats argue the Trump tax restructuring favored the wealthy while Republicans credit it for helping spur economic growth. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is aiming to have a vote in the Democratic-controlled House on the $3.5 trillion bill, or a somewhat downsized measure, as soon as the end of this month. The final House version of the bill would be tailored to win the support of moderate Democrats in the Senate, where Democrats have 50 of the 100 seats. Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote when needed. Grab, Southeast Asia's biggest ride-hailing to food delivery group, lowered its full-year forecasts on Tuesday, citing renewed uncertainty over pandemic-related movement restrictions despite encouraging vaccination rates in the region. Singapore-based Grab also said in a statement that it was making progress on its record merger deal agreed with U.S. Special Purpose Acquisition Company, SPAC, Altimeter Growth Corp earlier this year. And it reiterated that the deal, worth nearly $40 billion, is expected to be completed in the fourth quarter. Grab, which has operations across 8 countries and more than 400 cities in a region of 650 million people, said it expects to report group-level adjusted net sales of $2.1 billion to $2.2 billion, versus an expected $2.3 billion announced in April. It also forecast a group-level adjusted EBITDA loss of $0.7 billion to $0.9 billion for this year compared with a previously projected EBITDA loss of $0.6 billion. Grab's full-year 2021 outlook anticipates an extension of partial and complete lockdowns throughout several countries where Grab operates as a result of the continuing spread of COVID-19, the company said. Grab's second quarter adjusted net sales jumped 92% to $550 million while its adjusted EBITDA loss rose 4% to $214 million. Grab said its quarterly total gross merchandise value, GMV, a metric used to measure transaction volumes, jumped 62% to a record $3.9 billion. GMV for deliveries grew 58% to $2.1 billion, while GMV for mobility rose 93% to $685 million. Our deliveries business continues to outperform and is growing rapidly, with the addition of new offerings such as GrabMart and Grab Supermarket, And we expect to continue investing heavily in this segment, Peter Wee, Grab's chief financial officer, said. All 12 to 15-year-olds in England will be offered a COVID-19 vaccine after top medical advisors said on Monday that children would benefit from reduced disruption to their education. The British government confirmed that the offer would be extended to all children aged 12 to 15 after a unanimous recommendation by the chief medical officers, CMOs, from the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. I have accepted the recommendation from the chief medical officers to expand vaccination to those aged 12 to 15. Protecting young people from catching COVID-19, reducing transmission in schools and keeping pupils in the classroom, Health Minister Sajid Javid said in a statement. Rollout to the cohort in England will begin next week. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland set their own health policy, though each devolved administration received the same advice from their respective CMO. The CMOs recommended that children aged 12 to 15 in Britain get a first shot of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, after the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization, JCVI, earlier this month decided against making the recommendation. The children will be offered Pfizer-BioNTech's vaccine. Vulnerable children in the age bracket were already eligible for the shots. The United States, Israel and some European countries have rolled out vaccinations to children more broadly, putting pressure on the British government to follow suit. There have been more than 134,000 deaths from COVID-19 in Britain, and a rapid start to its vaccination rollout has slowed, with 81% of those over 16 receiving 2 vaccine doses. The JCVI had previously said the decision to vaccinate children was finely balanced as the government then sought further advice on the issue. The CMOs in a letter said that vaccinating children could reduce COVID-19 transmission and thus disruption to schools, and those benefits on balance provide sufficient extra advantage to recommend in favor of vaccinating this group. Vaccination will reduce education disruption, Chris Whitty, England's chief medical officer, said at a news briefing. We do not think that this is a panacea, there's no silver bullet, but we think it is an important and potentially useful additional tool to help reduce the public health impacts that come through educational disruption. The CMO said second doses would not be offered to the age group until at least spring, as they would wait for more data from around the world. New local COVID-19 infections more than doubled in China's southeastern province of Fujian, health authorities said on Tuesday, in the country's latest outbreak of the novel coronavirus. The National Health Commission said 59 new locally transmitted cases were reported for September 13, up from 22 infections a day earlier. All of them were in Fujian. In just 4 days, a total of 102 community infections have been reported in Fujian, a province bordered by Zhejiang to the north and Guangdong to the south. China's last outbreak, which affected mainly Jiangsu, ended about 2 weeks ago, with no new local cases reported in the eastern province. That outbreak lasted a month. Fujian's outbreak began in Putian, a city of 3.2 million, with the first case reported on September 10. Preliminary tests on samples from some Putian cases showed patients had contracted the highly transmissible Delta variant. The virus has since spread to the scenic coastal city of Xiamen, which reported 32 new local cases for September 13 compared with just 1 infection a day earlier. Like Putian, Xiamen has locked down some areas of higher virus risk, cut offline classes at kindergartens, primary schools and high schools, closed public venues such as cinemas, gyms and bars, and told residents not to leave the city for non-essential reasons. The 2 cities, however, are yet to announce tough citywide lockdowns as seen in early 2020 in China. 3 new local cases were also reported in nearby Quanzhou City, versus 6 infections a day earlier. Overall, mainland China reported 92 new confirmed coronavirus cases for September 13, including imported infections, compared with 49 a day earlier. China reported 20 new asymptomatic coronavirus cases, which it does not classify as confirmed infections, compared with 28 a day earlier. As of September 13, mainland China had recorded 95,340 confirmed cases, with the cumulative death toll unchanged at 4,636. A cyber surveillance company based in Israel developed a tool to break into Apple iPhones with a never-before-seen technique that has been in use since at least February, Internet security watchdog group Citizen Lab said on Monday. The discovery is important because of the critical nature of the vulnerability, which requires no user interaction and affects all versions of Apple's iOS, OS X, and watch OS, except for those updated on Monday. The tool developed by the Israeli firm, named NSO Group, defeats security systems designed by Apple in recent years. Apple said it fixed the vulnerability in Monday's software update, confirming Citizen Lab's finding. After identifying the vulnerability used by this exploit for iMessage, Apple rapidly developed and deployed a fix in iOS 14.8 to protect our users, said Ivan Kirstich, head of Apple Security Engineering and Architecture, in a statement. Attacks like the ones described are highly sophisticated, cost millions of dollars to develop, often have a short shelf life, and are used to target specific individuals. While that means they are not a threat to the overwhelming majority of our users, we continue to work tirelessly to defend all our customers, and we are constantly adding new protections for their devices and data, he added. An Apple spokesperson declined to comment on whether the hacking technique came from NSO Group. In a statement to Reuters, NSO did not confirm or deny that it was behind the technique, saying only that it would continue to provide intelligence and law enforcement agencies around the world with life-saving technologies to fight terror and crime. Citizen Lab said it found the malware on the phone of an unnamed Saudi activist and that the phone had been infected with spyware in February. It is unknown how many other users may have been infected. The intended targets would not have to click on anything for the attack to work. Researchers said they did not believe there would be any visible indication that a hack had occurred. The vulnerability lies in how iMessage automatically renders images. iMessage has been repeatedly targeted by NSO and other cyberarms dealers, prompting Apple to update its architecture. But that upgrade has not fully protected the system. Popular chat apps are at risk of becoming the soft underbelly of device security. Securing them should be top priority, said Citizen Lab researcher John Scott Railton. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency had no immediate comment. Citizen Lab said multiple details in the malware overlapped with prior attacks by NSO, including some that were never publicly reported. One process within the hack's code was named setframed, the same name given in a 2020 infection of a device used by a journalist at Al Jazeera, the researchers found. The security of devices is increasingly challenged by attackers, said Citizen Lab researcher Bill Marchak. A record number of previously unknown attack methods, which can be sold for $1 million or more, have been revealed this year. The attacks are labeled zero-day because software companies had 0 days notice of the problem. Along with a surge in ransomware attacks against critical infrastructure, the explosion in such attacks has stoked a new focus on cybersecurity in the White House as well as renewed calls for regulation and international agreements to rein in malicious hacking. The FBI has been investigating NSO, and Israel has set up a senior interministerial team to assess allegations that its spyware has been abused on a global scale. Although NSO has said it vets the governments it sells to, its Pegasus spyware has been found on the phones of activists, journalists and opposition politicians in countries with poor human rights records. The Gulf Coast of Texas and Louisiana was bracing on Monday for the arrival of Tropical Storm Nicholas, which was expected to batter the region with an intense storm surge and rains that could cause widespread and life-threatening flooding. The storm, carrying winds of 65 miles per hour, 104 kilometers per hour, was headed northward at 12 miles per hour, about 70 miles, 115 kilometers, south of Port O'Connor, Texas, the National Hurricane Center, NHC, said in a bulletin on Monday afternoon. Nicholas could reach hurricane intensity when it comes ashore along the southern or central coast of Texas late on Monday evening, the center said. It will be a very slow-moving storm across the state of Texas that will linger for several days and drop a tremendous amount of rain, Texas Governor Greg Abbott said on Monday afternoon. People in the region need to be prepared for extreme high-water events. Abbott said he will declare states of emergency in 17 counties and 3 cities across coastal Texas, adding that boat and helicopter rescue teams have been deployed or placed on standby. Rainfall totals of up to 16 inches, 40.6 centimeters, and possibly 20 inches in some isolated areas were forecast for parts of Texas through Wednesday. As the storm moves northeast, it was expected to dump up as much as 10 inches on parts of south-central Louisiana and southern Mississippi through Thursday, the NHC said. The National Weather Service issued storm surge, flood and tropical storm warnings and watches throughout the region, calling it a life-threatening situation. Nicholas is the second storm in as many weeks to threaten the U.S. Gulf Coast. Hurricane Ida wreaked havoc in late August, killing more than 24 people as it devastated communities in Louisiana near New Orleans. We want to make sure that no one is caught off guard by this storm, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards said at a news briefing on Monday afternoon. Heavy rainfall will be the primary concern. Edwards warned that drainage systems still clogged with debris from Ida and other recent storms may not be able to handle the expected deluge of rainwater, causing flash flooding. Teams of rescue workers with high-water vehicles and boats were prepared to respond to people trapped by flooding across southern Louisiana, Edwards said. Nicholas could also knock out electricity and hamper restoration efforts as more than 119,000 homes and businesses remain without power from Ida, he said. Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner urged the city's 2.3 million residents to stay at home starting on Monday evening. Parts of the city were expected to get 8 inches, 20 centimeters, or even more rain, according to the forecast. Take things seriously and prepare, he said during a news conference. This is primarily a rain event and we don't know how much rain we will be getting. Houston, the fourth most populous city in the United States, was devastated in 2017 when Harvey, a Category 4 hurricane, slammed Texas, dropping up to 40 inches of rain in some sections and killing more than 100 people. As of Monday afternoon, heavy rains fell for about 3 hours in Houston, where winds were light. Houston Independent School District canceled classes for Tuesday, while dozens of districts in Texas and Louisiana shut down on Monday. Houston Metro was suspending light rail and bus services on Monday evening while hundreds of flights were canceled or delayed at airports in Corpus Christi and Houston. Waves stirred up by Nicholas near 12 feet, 3.7 meters, in height were reported outside of Port Aransas, near Corpus Christi, Texas, with wind gusts up to 54 miles per hour about 40 miles east of Padre Island. Winds were expected to remain at 60 miles per hour with higher wind gusts, forecasters said. Nueces County, which includes the city of Corpus Christi, issued a disaster declaration on Monday, saying the community was under a threat of imminent disaster, injury and loss of life or property due to the anticipated storm. But on Monday afternoon, conditions in the coastal city of Galveston were still relatively calm, although wind gusts reached nearly 50 miles per hour. It ain't even raining, said Mike Garcia, manager of the Gumbo Diner. The water's choppy, but we have a full restaurant. Royal Dutch Shell on Monday began evacuating staff from a U.S. Gulf of Mexico oil platform and other firms began preparing for hurricane-force winds. Kono, Japan's leading contender to be prime minister, was a senior in high school. He asked his father to send him overseas for university, but was flatly refused. Instead, the elder Kono, a leading politician in the ruling party, took his son to a U.S. embassy reception in a bid to prove his English was not good enough. I went around the room telling people enthusiastically, in my broken English, how I wanted to study abroad but my father was against it, so I had a problem, Kono wrote in a recent book. Everyone said no, he should wait. But that response, and perhaps his son's audacity, somehow convinced the father, and Kono wound up spending 4 years at Georgetown University in Washington. Now 58, Japan's popular vaccines minister is fluent in English and hopes to parlay that early combination of self-belief, strategy and stubbornness into becoming leader of the conservative ruling Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, and Prime Minister. In addition to a resume studded with high-profile portfolios such as foreign affairs and defense, he runs a Twitter feed in 2 languages and, in a world of staid politicians, speaks bluntly, by contrast with Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga. Kono's a tight communicator, he's talking, said Corey Wallace, a foreign policy specialist at Kanagawa University. He's always out there, giving press conferences on the vaccine rollout and so on, Wallace added. Suga looked like he only communicated when he absolutely had to. Kono regularly tops opinion polls as voters' choice for the next prime minister, which will help him with both rank-and-file members in the LDP contest, and young lawmakers worried about keeping their jobs as a general election looms this year. Lawmakers are definitely going to pick who they think is better for re-election, Hino added. Kono's outreach has flourished on social media, where he has garnered 2.4 million followers on Twitter. For Lauren Rash, it's the little things that have snarled production at her tent factory here, like the many shades of black Velcro. Her company, Diamond Brand, just launched a new line of high-end wall tents called the Liminal, thick with vents and fasteners demanded by discerning campers. But that means using lots of Velcro. And that's a problem, because black Velcro comes in many shades, depending on the type of raw plastic resin used to make it. If I have older stock and put it with new, the colors won't match, said Rash. Black is not black is not black. Before supply chain breakdowns and shortages swept the world in the wake of the COVID pandemic, buying the bits and pieces for an assembly line was often as easy as clicking a button and waiting a few days or, at most, a few weeks for delivery. Shortages of metals, plastics, wood and even liquor bottles are now the norm. The upshot is a world where buyers must wait for delivery of items that were once plentiful, if they can get them at all. Rash has piles of tents she can't ship because she can't get the right aluminum tubing for their frames, for instance, while others lack the right zippers. Along with the shortages come hefty price increases, which has fueled fears of a wave of sustained inflation. There's growing tension among Federal Reserve policymakers over how to gauge the long-term impact on prices. Some Fed policymakers are more convinced than others that price pressures will recede after some of the supply chain disruptions are resolved. How this debate evolves could influence how quickly the Fed moves to reduce the pace of asset purchases launched at the start of the pandemic, and how soon it lifts the policy interest rate from its current level near zero. Rash and other local producers were part of a wide-ranging forum recently with Richmond Fed President Tom Barkin that focused on the challenges to the U.S. recovery posed by supply chain issues that are not getting resolved as fast as policymakers had hoped. Shortages are hitting everything from bulldozers to bourbon. Heavy equipment maker Caterpillar Incorporated, CAT, warned in July that its profits would suffer in the current quarter in part because of rising prices on hard-to-get components. The company said, among other things, it is looking for ways to get supplies from non-traditional sources to deal with shortages of plastic-resonant semiconductors. Lawson Whiting, chief executive of spirits producer Brown-Forman Corp., BFB, told investors earlier this month that shortages of key packaging materials, most notably glass, continue to create problems for the maker of brands such as Jack Daniel's and Woodford Reserve. New challenges continue to arise, including hurricane disruptions to U.S. oil refineries, which is again threatening supplies of plastics and other basic materials. Some industries are rushing to build new factories, including semiconductor producers under pressure to feed a growing appetite for chips needed in cars and electronics. But not all producers are eager to build new plants. The bike industry, for instance, is heavily concentrated in Asia, and producers there worry that the current surge in demand is only temporary.
The Asian factories have seen this time and time again, said Brent Graves, CEO of Cane Creek Cycling Components, another small manufacturer in Fletcher, N.C., which relies heavily on Asian suppliers for bike parts.
They say, well, we will run some extra overtime. But in terms of raw investment in facilities, on the whole they are reluctant to do it. Compounding the current problem are clogged supply lines. With so many manufacturers rushing to build supplies at the same time, the containers, ships, and trucks needed to move the goods often aren't available, and have soared in cost when they are. That has disrupted some of the mechanisms that normally help keep supplies and prices in check. David Riley, president of United Solutions, a plastics maker in Leominster, Mass., said soaring resin prices, he estimates they're up 100% for some types in the past year, is his biggest challenge. Normally he would have his buyers scouring overseas markets, including China, for cheaper resins. But we can't do that, he said, because shipping prices have risen so much that they wipe out any price advantage. Right now, producers in North America don't have the stiff competition that they would if container prices came back down. Secretary of State Antony Blinken beat back criticism of the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan on Monday at a contentious congressional hearing where at least 2 Republicans called on him to resign. In 5 hours of often testy exchanges with lawmakers, Blinken defended President Joe Biden's decision to pull out and pushed back on accusations that the State Department should have done more to help Americans and at-risk Afghans to be evacuated, blaming the previous administration for lacking a plan. He repeatedly noted that Republican former President Donald Trump had negotiated the withdrawal agreement with the Taliban, and said Biden's administration could not renegotiate because of threats from the group to resume killing Americans. There's no evidence that staying longer would have made the Afghan security forces or the Afghan government any more resilient or self-sustaining, Blinken said. We inherited a deadline. We did not inherit a plan, Blinken said, referring to the Trump administration's agreement to remove all U.S. forces from Afghanistan by May 1. Members of Congress, Biden's Democrats as well as opposition Republicans, have pledged to investigate since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan last month after a rapid advance. Blinken appeared on Monday before the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee and was to testify on Tuesday before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the first Biden administration official to testify publicly to lawmakers since the Islamist militant group's takeover. Fireworks had been expected, given the amount of finger-pointing over how the two-decade-long war ended. Many Republicans, particularly those closely allied to Trump, interrupted or even shouted over Blinken during the House hearing, a departure for a committee known for bipartisan cooperation. Donors have pledged more than $1.1 billion to help Afghanistan, where poverty and hunger have spiraled since the Islamist Taliban took power, and foreign aid has dried up, raising the specter of a mass exodus. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, speaking halfway through a UN conference seeking $606 million to meet Afghanistan's most pressing needs, said it was too early to say how much had been promised in response to the appeal. After decades of war and suffering, Afghans are facing perhaps their most perilous hour, he said. He said food could run out by the end of this month, and the World Food Programme said 14 million people were on the brink of starvation. The Taliban ruled Afghanistan according to their strict interpretation of Islamic law from 1996 to 2001 and were toppled in an invasion led by the United States, which accused them of sheltering militants behind the September 11 attacks. They swept back to power last month in a lightning advance as the last U.S.-led NATO troops pulled out and the forces of the Western-backed government melted away. With billions of dollars of aid flows abruptly ending due to Western antipathy and distrust towards the Taliban, donors had a moral obligation to keep helping Afghans after a 20-year engagement, several speakers in Geneva said. Neighbors China and Pakistan had already offered help. But UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet, also in Geneva, underlined the Western misgivings. She accused the Taliban of breaking recent promises by once more ordering women to stay at home rather than go to work, keeping teenage girls out of school, and persecuting former opponents. Beijing last week promised $31 million worth of food and health supplies, and on Friday said it would send a first batch of 3 million coronavirus vaccines. Pakistan sent food and medicine, and it called for Afghan assets frozen abroad to be released. Iran said it had dispatched an air cargo of aid. Past mistakes must not be repeated. The Afghan people must not be abandoned, said Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, whose country has close relations with the Taliban and would most likely bear the brunt of an exodus of refugees. Both China and Russia said the main burden of helping Afghanistan out of crisis should lie with Western countries. The U.S. and its allies have a greater obligation to extend economic, humanitarian and livelihood assistance, said Chen Shu, China's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva. The United States pledged $64 million in new humanitarian assistance at the conference, while Norway pledged an extra $11.5 million. Even before the Taliban seizure of Kabul last month, half the population, or 18 million people, depended on aid. That looks set to increase due to drought and shortages. Around $200 million of the new money is earmarked for the UN World Food Programme, which found that 93% of the 1,600 Afghans it surveyed in August and September were not getting enough to eat. WFP Executive Director David Beasley said 40% of Afghanistan's wheat crop had been lost, the price of cooking oil had doubled, and most people anyway had no way of getting money. While banks have started reopening, the queues for withdrawals are extremely long, and more importantly, no one who depended on the government for a salary, from civil servants to police, has been paid since July. 14 million people, 1 out of 3, are marching to the brink of starvation. They don't know where their next meal is, Beasley said. If we are not very careful, we could truly enter into the abyss in catastrophic conditions, worse than what we see now. The UN World Health Organization, also part of the appeal, wants to shore up hundreds of health facilities at risk of closure after donors backed out. A humanitarian and security crisis in Afghanistan will have direct implications across the globe. We should take collective action now.
Don't go yet. We are not done yet. Let me invite you to the world of Scci. Remember to attend our Monday website creation class, Wednesday our market outlook on trading and investment networking, and Friday our CEO mega networking and business presentation event. Lastly, let me share with you. Welcome to the world of Scci Digital TV. Watch and chat with friends on the latest news in Scci YouTube or Facebook channel. We showcase guest speaker seminar at 2 p.m. daily. Get to know our SCCI official members at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. daily. Wait no more, subscribe to SCCI YouTube and Facebook digital TV channel now. If you are a business owner, start selling your products through SCCI platforms.
Singapore first integrated social and business platform is here. Chat online marketplace. Everyone is chatting in chat. Connect with new friends around the world. Sharing opportunities and moments. Know what happened around the world. No more prank calls or targeted advertisements. Your personal data privacy is protected against remarketing. Download Chat Online Marketplace now. Singapore first integrated social and business platform. Available in Apple stores and Play Store. Need help to reach out to more customers? Want to increase your sales revenue? Singapore Chamber of Commerce and Industry can help you with your advertising needs through Facebook and Google marketing, YouTube and TikTok campaigns advertising, sales video production, live stream sales, website building and e-commerce advertising. Reach more customers and get more sales now. Make an appointment now through WhatsApp or click on the link below. A Nicaraguan political activist who opposes the government of President Daniel Ortega is in critical condition in a Costa Rica hospital after being shot, police and activists said on Sunday. João Maldonado, a well-known leader of demonstrations in 2018 in southwestern Nicaragua's Jinatepe municipality, was shot twice in the chest and once in the arm on Saturday evening in Escazú, 10 kilometers, 6 miles, west of Costa Rica's capital San Jose, a police spokeswoman said. Yefer Bravo of Unidad de Exiles Nicaraguan in Costa Rica said Maldonado, 32, had been organizing a protest against Ortega's government for Sunday in San Jose. The demonstration went ahead, but turnout was low. A Nicaraguan government official did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Maldonado underwent emergency surgery, his wife Nadia Robledo said. More than 80,000 Nicaraguans have requested refuge in neighboring Costa Rica since the 2018 protests. Numbers had increased in the past 3 months as Ortega's government clamped down on opposition politicians and activists. Malaysian Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob's coalition and the main opposition bloc will sign a cooperation pact on Monday to ensure political stability during the COVID-19 pandemic, in a move that could also help the premier with any confidence vote. Ismail Sabri took office last month with a slim parliamentary majority, becoming the third prime minister in as many years, but the country's constitutional monarch has called for him to face a vote of confidence to prove he has majority support in parliament. Parliament is scheduled to convene from Monday, but no date has been set for the confidence vote. In a joint statement late on Sunday, representatives from the government and the Pakatan Harapan opposition bloc, led by Anwar Ibrahim, said they have agreed to focus on transformation initiatives and reforms. All parties have agreed that this MO is aimed at returning political stability to the country in order to fight the COVID-19 pandemic and revive the economy through bipartisan cooperation, they said. The pact follows Ismail Sabri's offer on Friday to introduce political reforms including new laws to prevent defections and limit the term of a prime minister to 10 years, in a bid to win opposition support for his leadership. His offer also includes bipartisan agreement on every bill to be introduced in parliament, input from opposition parties on a National Recovery Council and immediate lowering of the minimum voting age from 21 to 18. He also said the opposition leader will be given the same remuneration and privileges as a cabinet minister. Malaysia has seen political instability since the election defeat in 2018 of the United Malays National Organisation, UMNO, which had governed for more than 60 years since independence, due to widespread corruption allegations. 2 governments have collapsed since then, and Ismail Sabri's appointment restored the premiership role to UMNO. Japan's wholesale inflation hovered near a 13-year high in August as raw material imports continued to rise on solid global demand, data showed on Monday, putting pressure on companies to pass on higher costs to households. Many analysts, however, expect companies to keep any price hike moderate as state of emergency curbs to combat the coronavirus pandemic weigh on domestic demand. It's difficult to pass over the wholesale price increase to consumer goods given the weak consumption, said Takumi Tsunoda, senior economist at Shinkin Central Bank Research. The BOJ might be forced to continue its massive easing even when central banks around the world seek normalization. The Corporate Goods Price Index, CGPI, which measures the price companies charge each other for their goods and services, rose 5.5% in August from a year earlier, slightly below a median market forecast for a 5.6% gain, Bank of Japan data showed. It was the sixth straight month of increase and a tad below the 5.6% surge in July, which was the fastest pace of increase since September 2008. The index, at 105.8, marked the highest level since 1982, when Japan's economy was booming from an asset-inflated bubble. While gains in fuel costs moderated, prices rose for chemical, steel and wood products as global demand for such goods remained strong, Shigeru Shimizu, head of the BOJ's Price Statistics Division, told a briefing. As the global economy continues to recover thanks to progress in vaccinations, domestic wholesale inflation will remain under upward pressure, though there's uncertainty over the outlook due to a resurgence in infections, he said. Underscoring the huge cost pressure companies were facing, the yen-based import prices rose a record 29.2% in August from a year earlier, the data showed. Japan's economy has emerged from last year's slump thanks to robust exports. But continuing state of emergency curbs have dampened prospects for a solid recovery in the current quarter. Core consumer prices fell 0.2% in July from a year earlier, marking the 12th straight month of declines and staying distant from the BOJ's elusive 2% target. The United Nations is convening an aid conference in Geneva on Monday in an effort to raise more than $600 million for Afghanistan, warning of a humanitarian crisis there following the Taliban takeover. Even before the Taliban seizure of Kabul last month, half the population, or 18 million people, was dependent on aid.
That figure looks set to increase due to drought and shortages of cash and food, UN officials and aid groups warn.
An abrupt end to billions of dollars in foreign donations following the collapse of Afghanistan's Western-backed government and the ensuing victory of the Taliban has heaped more pressure on UN programs. Yet UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says his organization is struggling financially. At the present moment the UN is not even able to pay its salaries to its own workers, he told reporters on Friday. The Geneva conference, due to begin on Monday afternoon, will be attended by top UN officials including Guterres, the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross Peter Maurer, as well as dozens of government representatives including German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas. About a third of the $606 million being sought would be used by the UN World Food Programme, which found that 93% of the 1,600 Afghans it surveyed in August and September were not consuming sufficient foods, mostly because they could not get access to cash to pay for it. It's now a race against time and the snow to deliver life-saving assistance to the Afghan people who need it most, said WFP Deputy Regional Director Anthea Webb. We are quite literally begging and borrowing to avoid food stocks running out. The World Health Organization, another UN agency that's part of the appeal, is seeking to shore up hundreds of health facilities at risk of closure after donors backed out. North Korea carried out successful tests of a new long-range cruise missile over the weekend, state media said on Monday, seen by analysts as possible the country's first such weapon with a nuclear capability. The missiles are a strategic weapon of great significance and flew 1,500 kilometers, 930 miles, before hitting their targets and falling into the country's territorial waters during the tests held on Saturday and Sunday, KCNA said. The latest test highlighted steady progress in Pyongyang's weapons program amid a gridlock over talks aimed at dismantling the North's nuclear and ballistic missile programs in return for U.S. sanctions relief. The talks have stalled since 2019. This would be the first cruise missile in North Korea to be explicitly designated a strategic role, said Ankit Panda, a senior fellow at the U.S.-based Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. This is a common euphemism for nuclear-capable system. It is unclear whether North Korea has mastered the technology needed to build warheads small enough to be carried on a cruise missile, but leader Kim Jong-un said earlier this year that developing smaller bombs is a top goal. South Korea's military did not disclose whether it had detected the tests, but said on Monday it was conducting a detailed analysis in cooperation with the United States. Rodong Sinmun, the ruling Workers' Party's official newspaper, ran photos of the new long-range cruise missile flying and being fired from a transporter erector launcher. The test provides strategic significance of possessing another effective deterrence means for more reliably guaranteeing the security of our state and strongly containing the military maneuvers of the hostile forces, KCNA said. In this course, detailed tests of missile parts, scores of engine ground thrust tests, various flight tests, control and guidance tests, warhead power tests, etc. were conducted with success. It was seen as the North's first missile launch after it tested a new tactical short-range ballistic missile in March. North Korea also conducted a cruise missile test just hours after U.S. President Joe Biden took office in late January. North Korea's cruise missiles usually generate less interest than ballistic missiles because they are not explicitly banned under UN Nations Security Council resolutions. That's not because ballistic missiles are somehow more threatening than cruise missiles, Jeffrey Lewis, a missile researcher at the James Martin Center for Nonproliferation Studies, said on Twitter. It's because the architects of the resolutions lack the imagination of Kim Jong-un and his Academy of Defense Sciences. An intermediate-range land attack cruise missile is a pretty serious capability for North Korea, Lewis said. This is another system that is designed to fly under missile defense radars or around them. Kim Jong-un did not appear to have attended the test, with KCNA saying Pak Jong-chan, a member of the Workers' Party's powerful Politburo and a secretary of its Central Committee, oversaw it. The reclusive North has long accused the United States and South Korea of hostile policy toward Pyongyang. The unveiling of the test came just a day before chief nuclear negotiators from the United States, South Korea and Japan meet in Tokyo to explore ways to break the standoff with North Korea. China's Foreign Minister, Wang Yi, is also scheduled to visit Seoul on Tuesday for talks with his counterpart, Chung Eui-yong. Biden's administration has said it is open to diplomacy to achieve North Korea's denuclearization, but has shown no willingness to ease sanctions. Sung Kim, the U.S. envoy for North Korea, said in August in Seoul that he was ready to meet with North Korean officials anywhere, at any time. A reactivation of inter-Korean hotlines in July raised hopes for a restart of the negotiations, but the North stopped answering calls as annual South Korea U.S. military exercises began last month, which Pyongyang had warned could trigger a security crisis. As international donors gather in Geneva on Monday to discuss humanitarian relief for Afghanistan under Taliban rule, neighbors China and Pakistan have already reached out with aid and discussions of future assistance. The economy in the war-torn country is in crisis and a humanitarian crisis is looming, experts say. Yet the United States and other Western nations are reluctant to provide the Taliban with funds until the Islamist militant movement provides assurances that it will uphold human rights and in particular the rights of women. The country's roughly $10 billion in foreign assets, held overseas, are also frozen. The understandable purpose is to deny these funds to the de facto Taliban administration, Deborah Lyons, the UN Secretary General's special representative for Afghanistan, told the UN Security Council this week. The inevitable effect, however, will be a severe economic downturn that could throw many more millions into poverty and hunger, may generate a massive wave of refugees from Afghanistan, and indeed set Afghanistan back for generations. Another possible effect could be to drive Afghanistan closer to its neighbors and close allies Pakistan and China, who have already sent planeloads of supplies to Afghanistan. They have also signaled they are open to ramped-up engagement. China announced last week it would send $31 million worth of food and health supplies to Afghanistan, among the first foreign aid pledges since the Taliban took power last month. Pakistan last week sent supplies such as cooking oil and medicine to authorities in Kabul, while the country's foreign minister called on the international community to provide assistance without conditions and to unfreeze Afghanistan's assets. Pakistan has had deep ties with the Taliban and has been accused of supporting the group as it battled the U.S.-backed government in Kabul for 20 years, charges denied by Islamabad. China, with a strong alliance with Pakistan, has also been engaging with the Taliban. Some analysts said it was enticed by the country's mineral wealth, including large reserves of lithium, a key component for electric vehicles. China has also expressed concern about militancy that could spill over from Afghanistan across its border, which it wants the Taliban administration to help contain. Beyond humanitarian aid, some experts and officials in the region say China's Huge Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, could provide Afghanistan with long-term economic viability. One possibility is Afghanistan joining the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, a central part of the BRI, under which Beijing has pledged over $60 billion for infrastructure projects in Pakistan, much of it in the form of loans. The Taliban would welcome joining CPEC. China would also be very happy, said Rustam Shah Mahmand, Pakistan's former ambassador to Afghanistan. China has not made any comment on the BRI, but Foreign Minister Wang Yi has said Beijing is ready to actively discuss the resumption of China-Afghanistan freight trains and facilitate Afghanistan's interaction with the outside world, especially its access to humanitarian supplies. Pakistan's Foreign Office and a Taliban spokesperson did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Taliban leaders in recent weeks have said they want good relations with China. A senior Taliban source said discussions have taken place with China in Doha about possible investment opportunities. China is interested in mining in particular, but any activity in the sector will be open to tender, the source said. The Taliban welcomes foreign investment that will benefit the country, he said. Two sources in Afghanistan and Pakistan familiar with the matter said China had been proactively encouraging Afghanistan to join CPEC for years but had been met with a non-committal response from the previous U.S.-backed government. The Taliban, with a need for economic stimulus and international recognition, seems more keen. The best way forward and the immediately available alternative option for Afghanistan's economic development is CPEC, which includes Pakistan and China, said Mushad Hussain Saeed, a Pakistani senator and former chairman of the China-Pakistan Institute. The new administration in Kabul would also be receptive to this, and they are keen on it. For China, though, which already has mining interests in Afghanistan that have struggled to get off the ground, any further investment would come with risks attached, given the uncertain security situation in the country. Absolutely, the security and stability of Afghanistan is also of importance to China, said Wang Huiyao, president of the Center for China and Globalization, a think tank. But also links to Central Asia and the connectivity through the Belt and Road, it's all related for the regional stability and prosperity. There's a stake there for China.
Don't go yet. We are not done yet. Let me invite you to the world of Scci. Remember to attend our Monday website creation class, Wednesday our market outlook on trading and investment networking, and Friday our CEO mega networking and business presentation event. Lastly, let me share with you. Welcome to the world of Scci Digital TV. Watch and chat with friends on the latest news in Scci YouTube or Facebook channel. We showcase guest speaker seminar at 2 p.m. daily. Get to know our Scci official members at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. daily. Wait no more, subscribe to Scci YouTube and Facebook digital TV channel now. If you are a business owner, start selling your products through Scci platforms.
Singapore first integrated social and business platform is here. Chat online marketplace. Everyone is chatting in chat. Connect with new friends around the world. Sharing opportunities and moments. Know what happened around the world. No more prank calls or targeted advertisements. Your personal data privacy is protected against for marketing. Download Chat Online Marketplace now. Singapore first integrated social and business platform. Available in Apple stores and Play Store. Need help to reach out to more customers? Want to increase your sales revenue? Singapore Chamber of Commerce and Industry can help you with your advertising needs through Facebook and Google marketing, YouTube and TikTok campaigns advertising, sales video production, live stream sales, website building and e-commerce advertising. Reach more customers and get more sales now. Make an appointment now through WhatsApp or click on the link below. Australia has purchased an additional 1 million doses of Moderna COVID-19 vaccine from the European Union, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said, as the country accelerates its inoculation program to fight record-high infections. The purchase is a boost for Australia's $2 trillion $1.5 trillion economy, which is at risk of slipping into its second recession in as many years as a result of lockdowns of the country's two most populous cities, Sydney and Melbourne. These lockdowns will remain until 70% of the country's near 26 million population are fully vaccinated, which is not expected until late October. But Morrison said the million doses will arrive later this week. Australia has ordered 25 million vaccines from Moderna. Some good news today. A family-sized dose of hope for our vaccination program, Morrison told reporters in Sydney. The purchase comes as Australia struggles to contain an outbreak of the highly transmissible Delta variant, with daily infections on Saturday topping 2,000 cases for the first time. Australia has recorded 73,610 COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began. The death toll rose by 7 to 1,091. Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, reported on Sunday 1,262 locally acquired COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours, down from 1,599 infections recorded a day earlier. Neighbouring Victoria reported 392 COVID-19 infections in the past 24 hours, down slightly from the 450 cases recorded in the state the day before. Meanwhile, Queensland, Australia's third most populous state, said on Sunday it does not need to order a lockdown after it detected 0 COVID-19 infections in the past 24 hours. The state on Saturday reported 5 cases of COVID-19, with State Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk warning that a lockdown could be needed to stop the spread of the virus. However, the state said testing had yet to detect any further cases, avoiding the need for such a measure. Women in Afghanistan will be allowed to study in universities as the country seeks to rebuild after decades of war, but gender segregation and Islamic dress code will be mandatory, the Taliban's new higher education minister said on Sunday. The minister, Abdul Baqi Haqqani, said the new Taliban government, named last week, would start building the country on what exists today, and did not want to turn the clock back 20 years to when the movement was last in power. He said female students would be taught by women wherever possible and classrooms would remain separated, in accordance with the movement's interpretation of Islamic Sharia law. Thanks to God we have a high number of women teachers. We will not face any problems in this. All efforts will be made to find and provide women teachers for female students, he told a news conference in Kabul. The issue of women's education has been one of the central questions facing the Taliban as they seek to persuade the world that they have changed since the harsh fundamentalist rule they imposed in the 1990s when women were largely banned from studying or working outside the home. Taliban officials have said women will be able to study and work in accordance with Sharia law and local cultural traditions, but strict dress rules will apply. Haqqani said hijab religious veils would be mandatory for all female students but did not specify if this meant headscarves or compulsory face coverings. On Saturday, a group, apparently made up of women students in black robes that covered them completely from head to foot, demonstrated in Kabul in support of the rules on dress and separate classrooms. Haqqani said where no women teachers were available, special measures would be adopted to ensure separation. When there is really a need, men can also teach women, but in accordance with Sharia, they should observe the veil, he said. Classrooms would be curtained off to divide male and female students where necessary, and teaching could also be done through streaming or closed-circuit TV. Classrooms divided by curtains have already been seen in many places since the Western-backed government collapsed and the Taliban seized Kabul last month. Haqqani told reporters that gender segregation would be enforced across Afghanistan and all subjects taught at colleges would also be reviewed in the coming months. Japan's defense ministry said on Sunday that a submarine believed to be from China was spotted in waters near its southern islands, as maritime tensions persist in the Pacific. Japan's Navy on Friday morning identified a submerged vessel sailing northwest just outside territorial waters near Amami Oshima Island, part of Kagoshima Prefecture, the ministry said in a statement. A Chinese destroyer was also spotted in the vicinity. Tokyo has complained of numerous intrusions by Chinese vessels into its territorial waters and near disputed islands in recent years. China has often reacted angrily to U.S. ships sailing through disputed areas of the South China Sea in what Washington calls displays of freedom of navigation. Senior Chinese diplomat Wang Yi, visiting Vietnam during a Southeast Asia trip, said those two countries should refrain from unilateral actions regarding the South China Sea that could complicate and magnify disputes. Sunday's announcement said Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force identified the vessels in a contiguous zone, which is outside territorial waters where vessels are required to identify themselves. Defense Minister Nobuo Kishi instructed his staff to gather information and maintain vigilant surveillance with a sense of urgency, the statement said. China's defense ministry did not respond to a request for comment immediately, and officials at the Chinese embassy could not immediately be reached for comment on Sunday. The submarine continued underwater westward in the ocean near Yokkate Island, the ministry said. The FBI on Saturday released the first document related to its investigation of the September 11, 2021, attacks on the United States and allegations of Saudi government support for the hijackers, following an executive order by President Joe Biden. Relatives of the victims had called on Biden to skip memorial events to mark Saturday's 20th anniversary if he did not declassify documents that they have contended will show Saudi Arabian authorities supported the plot. The partially redacted 16-page document released by the FBI outlined contacts between the hijackers and Saudi associates, but no evidence the government in Riyadh was complicit in the attacks, which killed nearly 3,000 people. Saudi Arabia has long said it had no role in the attacks. The Saudi embassy in Washington did not immediately respond to a request for comment sent out of hours late on Saturday. In a statement issued on September 8, the embassy said Saudi Arabia has always advocated for transparency around the events of September 11, 2001, and welcomes the release by the United States of classified documents relating to the attacks. As past investigations have revealed, including the 9/11 Commission and the release of the so-called 28 pages, no evidence has ever emerged to indicate that the Saudi government or its officials had previous knowledge of the terrorist attack or were in any way involved, the embassy's statement said. 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. A U.S. government commission found no evidence that Saudi Arabia directly funded al-Qaeda, the group given safe haven by the Taliban in Afghanistan at the time. It left open whether individual Saudi officials might have. The families of roughly 2,500 of those killed, and more than 20,000 people who suffered injuries, businesses and various insurers, have sued Saudi Arabia seeking billions of dollars. In a statement on behalf of the organization 9/11 Families United, Terry Strada, whose husband Tom was killed on September 11, said the document released by the FBI on Saturday put to bed any doubts about Saudi complicity in the attacks. Now the Saudi secrets are exposed and it is well past time for the kingdom to own up to its officials' roles in murdering thousands on American soil, the statement said. Japan's minister in charge of vaccines, Taro Kono, led a public opinion poll on who should succeed Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga as head of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. Kono had 27% support in the poll by the Nikkei newspaper and TV Tokyo that asked who would be the right person to lead the party and become the next prime minister. The results of the September 9 to 11 poll were released on Saturday. Former LDP Secretary General Shigeru Ishiba was next with 17%, and ex-policy chief Fumio Kishida was third with 14%. Former Interior Minister Sanae Takaichi was fifth with 7%. Kono, who also serves as Minister of Administrative Reform, announced his candidacy on Friday, the third to make his intention official after Kishida and Takaichi. Ishiba may not run for the party's leadership and instead will likely support another candidate, the Jiji News Service said Saturday, citing sources close to him. Suga, in a surprise move, said on September 3 he would step down, marking an end to a one-year tenure that was marred by plunging public support and dissatisfaction with his coronavirus response. That set the stage for a September 29 leadership vote among grassroots LDP members and lawmakers. The winner is virtually assured the premiership because the LDP has a majority in Parliament's lower house. Following the LDP leadership vote, Japan will likely hold a general election in the first half of November, Kyoto reported citing ruling party lawmakers. The Nikkei TV Tokyo poll follows earlier one showing strong public support for Kono, 58, to succeed Suga. Thousands of Catalans chanted, sang and waved flags as they marched through Barcelona on Saturday, calling for the region's independence from Spain. The march, organized by the grassroots Assembly Nacional Catalana ANC, was the first since Spain's government pardoned 9 Catalan separatist leaders who had been jailed for their role in a 2017 botched bid for independence, which was Spain's biggest political crisis in decades. Most marchers wore face coverings. Police said about 108,000 people took part. ANC put the figure close to 400,000. The figure was lower than in 2019, when about 600,000 marched, and last year, when only small static protests were organized to comply with COVID-19 restrictions. Some of the 9 pardoned politicians and activists attended Saturday's protests. In Catalonia, September 11 marks La Diada, the anniversary of the fall of Barcelona to Spanish forces in 1714, and it has been marked in the past decade by separatist rallies. For the first time in 4 years, 9 very special people have participated in La Diada again. The political prisoners are back on the streets, said ANC chairwoman Elisenda Paluzzi. Cultural activist Jordi Cuixart, who was among those jailed, urged the crowd to continue to fight for independence. Those who ask us to turn the page and do not want us to fight for self-determination. What is Spain's plan for Catalonia? None. Only repression and more repression, he said. The protests took place at a moment of lower tension between Barcelona and Madrid than in past years as the central and regional governments favor dialogue despite their opposing views on independence. The central and regional governments are expected to meet next week in Barcelona to resume talks on Catalonia's political conflict, which have been suspended since February 2020. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has not confirmed yet whether he will attend, and the talks risk being overshadowed by a recent clash between both governments related to Barcelona's airport. The Spanish government has said it is cancelling a proposed €1.7 billion, $2 billion, investment to expand the airport, saying it lacked backing from regional authorities who have questioned its potential environmental impact while accusing Madrid of acting dishonestly. Greek police fired tear gas and water cannon on Saturday to break up a demonstration of thousands of people protesting against mandatory coronavirus vaccinations. Authorities said protesters hurled flares at police in Greece's second biggest city of Thessaloniki, who blocked them from trying to reach the area where Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis was due to deliver his annual economic address. The annual speech typically attracts crowds of demonstrators, and police estimated more than 15,000 people, including labor unions, took part in the demonstrations on issues ranging from economic policy to COVID-19 vaccines. Protests against COVID-19 vaccinations began in July after the government announced the mandatory inoculation of healthcare workers and nursing home staff. Authorities have suggested vaccines could become obligatory for other groups too, such as teachers. Yes to vaccines, but not mandatorily, the Federation of Public Hospital Workers, POEDIN, said in a statement. Greece has suspended nearly 6,000 frontline healthcare workers from their jobs for missing a September 1 deadline to get at least one vaccine shot. Earlier this month, it offered unvaccinated healthcare workers a second chance to get a shot and allow those who have been suspended to return to work. POEDIN is worried that a total of 10,000 unvaccinated staff could be suspended, disrupting operations at understaffed hospitals at a time when infections remain high. Demonstrations against compulsory vaccination also took place in Istanbul on Saturday, where more than 2,000 Turks protested against the government's new inoculation push. Around 5.7 million Greeks, or 55% of the population, are fully vaccinated against COVID-19 and 59% have received one dose, according to the latest official figures. The country recorded 2,197 confirmed new infections on Saturday, and 39 deaths. Hundreds of people gathered in central Madrid on Saturday to call for better protection for LGBT rights after a series of homophobic attacks that have shocked Spain in recent months. People waved rainbow flags and carried banners reading, "Justice, touch one of us, touch us all, we are being killed. We are here to protest against the continuous homophobic attacks and the constant aggressions that happen weekend after weekend," said protester Gabriel Escribano. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez on Friday chaired an urgent meeting of ministers, community leaders and police to discuss how to reduce hate crimes, which have been growing by around 9% a year since 2014, according to the Interior Ministry. Interior Minister Fernando Grande Marlaska said on Wednesday hate crimes were on the rise and becoming more violent. There have been growing calls for the government to take action since the killing of nursing assistant Samuel Luis, who was beaten to death in July in the northwestern region of Galicia allegedly because of his sexual orientation. Spain has long been praised as an LGBT-friendly destination, and was a pioneer of gay rights, becoming just the third country in the world to legalize gay marriage in 2005. More than 2,000 Turks demonstrated in Istanbul on Saturday against official coronavirus-related mandates including vaccinations, tests and masks, responding to new government measures and an inoculation push. In Turkey's largest such protest, mostly maskless people shouted slogans, held placards and Turkish flags, and sang songs in defense of what they called individual rights, echoing anti-vaccine rallies in some other countries. This pandemic is just going on with even more restrictions on our freedoms and there's no end to it, said Erdem Boz, 40, a software developer. Masks, vaccines, PCR tests might all become mandatory. We're here to voice our discontent with this. On Monday, the government began requiring proof of vaccination or a negative COVID-19 test for all users of intercity planes, buses and trains, as well as for those attending large events such as concerts or theater performances. All unvaccinated school employees are required to take a PCR test twice per week. Masks and social distancing are required in public. Some 64% of Turks have received 2 vaccine shots under a national program that has administered more than 100 million jabs. Still, about 23,000 new cases emerge daily, prompting the health minister, Fardin Koca, to warn this month of a pandemic of the unvaccinated. On Saturday, Koca said on Twitter, "Vaccines are the final solution. Rules are very necessary." Protesters attending the government-approved rally in Istanbul's Maltepe district were not required to show proof of vaccination nor a negative test, according to Reuters witnesses. Police did not intervene. "We're against all these mandates," said Einar Bayrak Belen, of the so-called pandemic resistance movement. "I think that the vaccines aren't complete, and that it's an experimental liquid." Turkey's top trending Twitter hashtag was, "Maltepe is everywhere, resistance is everywhere."
Don't go yet. We are not done yet. Let me invite you to the world of SCCI. Remember to attend our Monday website creation class. Wednesday our
Need help to reach out to more customers? Want to increase your sales revenue? Singapore Chamber of Commerce and Industry can help you with your advertising needs through Facebook and Google marketing, YouTube and TikTok campaigns advertising, sales video production, live stream sales, website building and e-commerce advertising. Reach more customers and get more sales now. Make an appointment now through WhatsApp or click on the link below. Singapore first integrated social and business platform is here. Chat online marketplace. Everyone is chatting in chat. Connect with new friends around the world. Sharing opportunities and moments. Know what happened around the world. No more prank calls or targeted advertisements. Your personal data privacy is protected against for marketing. Download Chat Online Marketplace now. Singapore first integrated social and business platform. Available in Apple stores and Play Store. U.S. health officials believe that Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine could be authorized for children aged 5 to 11 years old by the end of October, 2 sources familiar with the situation said on Friday. The timeline is based on the expectation that Pfizer, which developed the shot with Germany's BioNTech, will have enough data from clinical trials to seek emergency use authorization for that age group from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, towards the end of this month, the sources said. They anticipate the FDA could make a decision on whether the shot is safe and effective in younger children within 3 weeks of the U.S. submission. The decision on whether to authorize a vaccine for younger children is eagerly children started school in recent weeks amid a wave of infections driven by the Delta variant. Top U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci outlined the timetable during an online town hall meeting attended by A second source familiar with the situation said that the FDA anticipated a similar timeline for Pfizer. If Pfizer submits its EO by the end of September,